Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whatever time it is you're watching this video. Welcome back to my YouTube channel and to another week's progress on the Missabe and Western Railroad build. This week I made a lot of visible progress on the lower helix. In part that's because I was no longer waiting for materials to arrive, and also because once the first lap of a helix is in, the next few laps will go fairly quickly, because at that point the hard work has been done. So without further ado, let's head out into the workshop and take a look at the progress.
Well, it's Monday morning. I haven't been out here at all over the weekend, so everything is exactly as I left it on Friday. If you recall, I had most of the risers in over this new end of the helix, and I also discovered some imperfections in the first half lap. So I'm going to do a little bit of shimming this morning, and I have 4 different thicknesses. I have some of this plywood from the Fast Tracks quick sticks, that's 1/16 of an inch thick, and then I have some 1mm aircraft plywood, and then I have the cover from a notepad which has 2 different thicknesses of card. So altogether I should have every thickness I need. But even though the amount of shimming will be minor, it's worth taking the time to get it perfect, because the entire helix will depend on the accuracy of the first level. So let me just quietly get on with that, and I'll check in with you again later. Well, earlier this morning I put shims in a few places to get the inner track to be as even a grade as I could possibly manage. And then I've continued all the way around, got the last 5 risers in up to the end of the first lap of the helix. I've also drawn the guidelines for the road bed. But now there's one more thing that I need to do. As I mentioned, I got the grade on the inside track to be as even as I possibly could. But what about the outside track? Obviously it's a wider radius and therefore a longer circuit, but it has to gain the same height, therefore it is less of a grade, until we get to the straight section in the middle, where the grade is the same on all 4 tracks, which means that on the outer tracks the grade is not constant. Now it probably doesn't matter a great deal, but I want to make sure that I don't have problems at the end of the straight with unwanted uncoupling of long cars. So what I have to do is shim up the outer track at the ends of the curves. Starting from the beginning, all 4 tracks at that point will be the same elevation, and then the outer track around here needs to gradually be raised up above the inner track to a maximum point where the curve joins the straight, which is about where this plywood joint is across the middle of the frame now. And then I need to lose that height again gradually to the end of the straight where the far end of the level is, so that once again all 4 tracks are the same height at the start of the next curve. And then I will repeat the process around the other half of the helix. That way I can get all 4 tracks to have an even grade all the way around. It means that in 2 places I will end up with some super elevation, but that really doesn't matter, it won't hurt. And since the outside of the roadbed is approximately 1 1/3 times the radius of the inside, or put another way, the inside radius is approximately 3/4 of the outside radius. What I need to do is figure out exactly how much I gain on the straight, and then have the maximum shimming approximately 1/4 of that. And as this level shows here, the rise on the straight is approximately 3/4 of an inch. And I calculated that if I raise up each of these risers by a cumulative 20 thou, I will be about right. So I'm going to leave the first one. So I'm going to go 20 thou on that joist, 40 thou on that one, 60, 80, 100, 120. And then the spacing here is a little bit variable. That's a bigger gap, so I'll go to 150 there, and 180th thou there, which is 4mm, which is very close to what we calculated. And then I will gradually lose it over these two joists so that that one is again horizontal. Anyway, I bought some styrene scraps out to the workshop with me. I'm using styrene this time because I don't want them to get mixed up with the wood shims that I had to use to get the inside track perfect earlier. I want to be able to tell the difference. Well, I've now inserted those styrene shims. You can see a couple here. They're just approximately 1-inch squares on the outer edge only. And I've been all the way around both the inner and outer tracks with my grade testing tool, and as far as I can tell, the grade is exactly even all the way around on both the inner and outer tracks. So I'm just going to call that step finished and get on with the next one. Well, I've got about as far as I can go with the carpentry for now. This section here, from this joint to the end, has to come off one more time while I do the track work underneath it. And also while it's off, I'm going to take the opportunity to draw around it on a piece of cardboard so that I have a template for making the second layer where I'm going to use up all the offcuts. And obviously if I'm going to draw around it, I've got to do that before I put the fence on the edge. Next thing I'm going to do is continue the road bed around this next layer. I'm going to start down there where I left off last time, near the glue bottle, and come round here. Aim to get about as far as the drill. And if I get that far, that'll be a good day's work. Then tomorrow I will take this piece out and work on the track below it. Get this junction in, and all the main line in, and the bottom layer of the Helix. Had a big box of track arrive today. Here it is, 200 yards of Pico Flex track. That ought to be enough to keep me going for a while. Well, it is Tuesday morning, and today is going to be a track laying day. As you can see, most of the first lap of the Helix is ready for track, and also the approaches to it at the lower end. The only slightly complicated bit today is to get this double junction installed. And here what I have to do is to combine a Fast-Track's 14-degree crossing with a pair of Pico left-hand number 8 turnouts. And that is made possible by increasing the track centres to around 3 inches, leaving space for a curve between them. When I built this crossing, I deliberately made sure there was no glue on this end of the ties and the same the other end. That allows me to have the shortest possible straight through the crossing. And if I find I don't have quite enough space, then I'll just trade in the Pico number 8s for a pair of Fast-Track number 7s. But I think this will work. I can always trim the exit rail slightly so the curve can start way back here instead of all the way up the end. But the first order of business today is to get rid of this piece of Helix from this joint here where the two screws are, all the way to the end. This piece will come out, and then I've got better access to lay the track underneath it. Well, time has caught up with me today, but I did make some good progress. I laid this double track Y, all 3 legs, this junction here, and then the first lap of the Helix all the way from where the clamps are around the far end down this straight and halfway around this end, and then 2 more yards beyond where my original target was. So I'm going to just wrap up here for the day, and I will check in with you again tomorrow. Although Tuesday's track laying progress was, I think, quite impressive, all the way around the double track Y at the bottom of the Helix and around 3/4 of the first lap, all 4 tracks, there's still a lot of hidden work to do. I haven't got any of the feeder wires in yet, and I still have to decide where to route the bus wires around this end of the helix, because it's going to have to be removable from the benchwork below it. So I can't run the bus wires through the joists underneath the track bed. I'm going to have it as part of the detachable helix sections. So I'm probably going to tack it to the inside safety fence, let it run around above the joists. I also have to cut all the section joints. Where I run from one section to another, I've made these keeper plates by supergluing 2 copperhead ties to a piece of styrene and then gluing that underneath the track in place of 2 plastic ties. I solder them up firmly, and now that the glue has had plenty of time to go hard, I will cut the joints with a Dremel, and that should eliminate any possibility of the track trying to misalign itself. So once I've cut all those joints and got the feeders in for the first lap, I can test everything, and with that in mind I've added this temporary piece of cantilever benchwork with some offcuts of track so that I can get around this junction at the end. So let me get busy and I will check in with you again later. Well, I've now cut all my section joints with the Dremel and inserted all my feeders through holes. Note that along this back area here and the outer 2 tracks of the helix, the feeders are reversed. That is because these outer 2 tracks, the running direction is also reversed. The train coming down the inner helix, running around the lower level and then returning up the outer helix, will do so without reversing direction. I've already soldered a few feeders on, got a lot more to do, and then I can hook them up underneath and test everything. So I will continue and check in with you again later. I have now installed all the feeds on all the track that I've laid, all the way around to the 3/4 mark on the first lap. I've run the locomotive all the way up to here on all 4 tracks, and there are no shorts. I have one small dead section. I did notice when I installed this turnout, one of the jumpers was broken on this frog, so I need to install a feed to this closure rail, and then everything will be 100%. So let me do that and I will check in with you again later. For the second lap of the helix, the procedure is to draw around the pattern that I made a few days ago on some of the larger offcuts. Here's one that I've already cut out, and then there's 2 more sections on the piece that came out of the middle of the semicircle, and that will give me enough pieces to do another half a lap. I'm still going to need at least 1 more full sheet because I don't have very many sizable offcuts left, but it's still using a lot less material than if I tried to do it just in 3 pieces like I did the first lap. Well, I now have 3 pieces of roadbed that make an exact fit for the next half lap of the helix. The next thing I have to do is cut a bunch of risers, and they will all be exactly the same height as this post here. So all I have to do is measure that, and then that is my spacing for the helix all the way around. And what I'll do is I'll cut 2 full-length strips on the table saw, so that'll give me enough material to do all the risers in one go. Because I don't want to have to come back and do some more later and risk not getting them quite the same. Well, this half lap is now permanently installed. Of course, it means that access to the middle of the helix is now a little more awkward. Instead of just stepping over it all the time, as I have been until this morning, from now on I'm just going to have to get down the creeper and slide underneath it. Anyway, I am going to go inside now, get a drink, and I'm going to come out and work on the other end. I've still got to get some more track in over that corner before I finish the next lap, or I might just leave the last piece removable. But since I've used up all my big offcuts, I'm going to have to get another full sheet, and by cutting one of these pieces backwards I can get them both out of one sheet, and then I will have some more offcuts to use up again on the next lap. So don't go away, I'll check in with you again later. Well, I think I've been pretty productive today. I've done virtually a whole lap of the Helix, risers, decking, fences and roadbed. I've also got the next piece ready to install, but I can't put it in until I've laid the track underneath it. So I will get that done tomorrow, get it installed. I'll probably get all the track all the way around to here, and then go back to bench work again. Good morning everybody. This is how I left the project yesterday. It is Saturday morning. My goal today is to get about 3/4 of a lap of track done, wired up and tested, and then to install the next piece of the bench work that I cut yesterday. Get the sides on that, get roadbed on that, and then I'll see how much longer I have. I have an electrical issue to take care of. There is a section under these crossovers where one of the switch machines is shorting out. I've got to find that. At the moment that bus is unplugged, but I have to plug it back in again and then disconnect the switch machines one at a time until I find the one that's bad. And if I get that far, I will consider that a good day's work. Well, I have now had the locomotive running to the end of track on all 4 tracks. So every inch of track that has been laid has now been wired and tested. So now I can start the bench work for the next level.
Well, that's all for this week. Hope you enjoyed the show and found something useful, and I hope to see you again next time for another installment. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.